Any second now. Come on. I think YouTube's just having a fit. Oh, there we go. I think we're up. Yes. Hello, YouTube. Um, Welcome to our live stream of the review of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. If you have questions, stick them in the chat. We will read them out this time, we promise.
Mhm.
Coops will be on keeping eye for
Okay,
YouTube comments.
I
He's
have a
been told.
role. All right.
You
Okay.
have a
Yeah.
role.
hmm
Okay. Hello and welcome to the Everything F1 podcast. Joining me this evening for our review of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix is Coops. Good evening.
Hello.
And Amy, welcome back.
Hello, it's been a long time, but I am back.
Great to have you back. And a good one to be back for. There's a fair bit to talk about for this one. We'll get into our full review of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix in just a second. Before we do, we are, of course, Everything F1. Check us out on all socials. You'll find us at Join EF1 on Facebook, Instagram, X, and Threads, and at EF1 Official on TikTok. You can also check out our website, everythingf1.com, for daily news and articles about all things motorsport, not just F1. And again, for all things motorsport, if you're looking for merch to follow your favorite team this year, check out the raceworks.com for all of your F1 and motorsports merch needs. Use our code EF1 at checkout for 10% off site wide. And thank you as always to the raceworks.com for their continued support. Final one, we are doing a giveaway on our YouTube channel. So if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe. If you're not watching on YouTube, you might head over to our YouTube channel. You'll find us Everything F1, all one word, over on YouTube. Hit subscribe, and when we hit 500 subscribers, we'll be picking one lucky subscriber who will win themselves a Lego F1 set, one of the Speed Champions kit of your choice for your favorite team for the 2024 models that they have up there. We will pick a winner at 500 and another one at 1,000 subscribers. It's the easiest competition in the world. All you have to do, head over Everything F1, all one word on YouTube, and hit subscribe. Right then, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, and we have to get straight into it because the biggest talking point about it was turn one, lap one. I know that sounds like a bit of an indictment against the rest of the race, but it was okay. But turn one, lap one, Max Verstappen and Oscar Piastri. Oscar coming out the better eventually, but Coop straight into it. Did Max deserve a penalty for running wide and gaining an advantage?
100%. Because I mean, he was never going to make the corner at that speed, regardless
Mm.
of Oscar being there. So, a lot of people are saying that, Martin Brundle will favour the British driver, but in this particular occasion, there was no British driver there, and he was 100% right. He lifted off the brakes, opened up the steering, went straight on, kept going, and that cost him the win or the opportunity for the win.
Mm. Yeah, it certainly did. And Amy, the we saw afterwards that Christian Horner, in what I thought was a little bit of a pathetic attempt, printing out screenshots to bring into the stewards to say, "Oh, this is correct." It doesn't show the full context at all. And as Coop said, he lifted off the brakes. A lot of calls, and Max seemed to be so pissed off because in his mind, he did the same thing Oscar did in Mexico last year. But actually, what I saw it as, and I think others agree with me on this one, is he did the same thing twice, just from different positions. In Mexico last year, he was on the inside and he came off the brakes early and ran really wide. He was never going to make the corner properly. And in that scenario, he pushed Lando wide. This time around, he's on the outside, he's losing the position, and he just comes off the brakes and goes wide and keeps the position. How did you see it, and what did you make of the whole thing, and just Max's and Red Bull's reaction to the whole thing?
To be honest, I think even as someone who quite likes Max Verstappen, I do think that was a clear penalty. But that might like generally online as well. I do think a lot of people agree with the penalty. But I think it's one of the reasons why I like him as a driver. Though I know it was a penalty and it was bad driving in essence, then, but I think he does take those risks, and it was a big risk to take. And clearly, he thought he had grounds to stand on before doing it. And
Mm.
I do, you have to acknowledge that Red Bull are just going to be there trying to help their driver find any loophole and any sort of thing they can try and find to back up the fact that maybe it wasn't a penalty. But I think we've got to appreciate that and let them do that. But I think it was straight up a penalty, and I think Oscar handled himself well with it
Mm.
all, actually, to be honest. He was quite mature about it. I think the issue is when I say mature, I don't want people now to think that I don't think Max is. I think Max can throw out his toys at the best of times, but um I think in this scenario, in some ways, I think Red Bull were just really trying to push him to get. I think he's because Max is losing these wins now. He's
Mm.
losing that dominance that I think he felt comfortable in. And he's panicking a bit. And I think I can see that in him, which is odd because he's one of the drivers who I would arguably say is probably quite calm and collected. But I think he's starting to be like, I'm going to do any risk to make sure I'm one. Because as soon as he's P1, he knows he can win a race.
Mm.
So he's just trying to get there quicker. And I just think it just didn't work out for him this time around.
Well, it's interesting you put it that way. And Coops, you were shaking your head there a second ago. We saw, Red Bull, and Amy, to your point, it historically when Max gets out in front, he can pull a 5 second gap, and the penalty doesn't matter at all. And that was clearly what was on his and Red Bull's mind, whether they thought they were deserving of the penalty or not. They think track position is everything, vanish off into the distance. And to Oscar's credit, as you said, he managed that perfectly. Even with his tires going, he kept in that 5 second gap when the pit stop happened and took the lead again. But Coops, on the flip side of that, I mean, not one race ago, we saw Lando Norris go wide and overtake Lewis Hamilton off the track. And on the flip side of it, Lando's in the same position. He's losing those wins. He's getting the pressure put on him. And straight away, McLaren are give that position back right now. Don't care if you're right or wrong. Give that position back right now because we don't want to risk it. We don't want the penalty. Give it back, overtake him again. Which side would you fall down on? Is it Red Bull need to cop on a bit and like stop enabling this sort of we'll do it because the penalty doesn't matter? Or do McLaren maybe need to get a little bit more arrogant and say, you made the pass, now go make the distance?
Well, Max doesn't have the car to make the 5 seconds because, well, he didn't.
No.
So, and he lost the race by, what was it, 2.5 seconds? Two-ish, around about the 2 second
Something
mark.
like that. But Oscar was shown in the end, like he was pumping in fastest laps at the end of the race. He had plenty of life in his tires. He could
Yeah.
have pulled out a big gap. And there was
So,
back markers in the way at that point as well.
yeah, so, he was within a couple of seconds by the end. So if you look at it in a kind of black and white sense, he lost the race because of the 5 second penalty. Now, would he have won it with just giving it straight back? Maybe not, but he would have been more. It would have forced McLaren into a slightly different strategy call.
Mhm.
It would have then there would have been more of a chess game of will they do it, will they don't do it. Okay, we know that Hannah Schmitz in Red Bull as a strategist is a genius when it comes to these things, and she's shown countless times of just pulling out these wee strategy diamonds that cause other teams to do something. And we know that McLaren aren't exactly perfect when it comes to these recalls. We've seen it last year. There haven't been an opportunity for them to make a mess, but they don't iron these things out straight away.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's a slight arrogance from Red Bull that they need to temper because they don't have the tools to just be like, yeah, I'm arrogant, and this is the reason why. And you kind of go, well, okay, fair enough. They don't have that. So would it have hurt him? Yeah, it would have bruised his ego for a minute or two, but then he had the whole race to battle and really properly put the pressure on. Whereas it kind of being stubborn and going, no, fine, 5 seconds, and then he has his wee arrogant moment and his wee sweary moment, takes it and then loses the race anyway.
You make a really good point there in the strategy call because you're absolutely right. Hannah Schmitz, the Red Bull head of strategy, is, as you say, absolutely a genius, arguably the best strategic mind in the entire paddock. And like you're right, if they'd just given the position back, they could have played the chess game. They could have undercut Oscar. They could have pitted early. They could have done something and forced McLaren into a mistake, which, as you said, they haven't been put in a position to make yet this year. But they haven't yet proved that they don't have it in them still. That gaffe, that mistake. And Red Bull are the team who should be forcing that out of them. So that's a really, really interesting point. I think that's a really good point. And you're right. Oscar just had, yeah, stay close enough. We'll pit when he pits. We'll come out ahead of him.
Yeah, and
Easy peasy. Game over.
like when you're racing a team that have got a better car than you, and obviously it's not as dominant as what Red Bulls were a couple of years ago, but they're still the better car. You've got to force them into these strategy calls. You've got to do something. Literally, what Red Bull and Verstappen did was they gave the ball to Piastri. They just went, right, do what you need to do. And it was not a particularly hard decision for McLaren to make. All they needed to do was work out where the gap was, the ideal gap. The McLaren's one of the best things about McLaren's car is it's really, really kind on its tyres compared to Red Bull and compared to Ferrari and Mercedes. So they have all the tools, and they just basically went, right, okay, you do it. You force us into making some sort of strategy call. You force us to do something, and they should have just went, give it back. We'll deal with it. And you know, everybody would have been trying to second guess each other. It would have been actually a particularly interesting duel.
Yeah, it would have been. It would have been interesting for the championship to see a straight up long fight between Piastri and Max, because a first lap, first corner, first lap, anyone could come out ahead in that. And like if there was a wall there, and this is back to the argument of runoffs, which we won't get into right now because in the past couple of days that has been done to death. I think everybody has brought that up in the past couple of days. But if there was a wall there, this wouldn't have happened because Max either backs out or breaks his car in half. There's no two ways. Like he's not making that move in Monaco. No. He's not going around the outside into Saint-Devote in the first turn in Monaco because he will be in a wall. And he's been in that wall before and he doesn't like that wall. And I don't think he's going to get in that wall again in Monaco. So there's that argument that a street track and all tracks should have gravel or sand or a wall to, get around stuff like this. But on the penalty, Amy, the FIA, there was a lot of calls that, the 5 second was not harsh enough and clearly Red Bull didn't think so. It's not really a penalty because their whole approach to it was very clearly, well, we're in the lead, we have a safety car restart, we'll just pull that gap. Now, they couldn't, and as Coop said, they're a bit arrogant and naive to think that they have the material to do that anymore, even with Max in the car. But the 5 second was arguably not strong enough, and the FIA came out and said that it would have been a 10 second only for the first lap incident. But is this another kind of shining light on the fact that the 5 second penalty is not enough for stuff like this? And it is a thing in other series that, they can say, give the position back now within 2 laps, or we'll smack a 10 second on you. And should there be a version of that or something more severe than a 5 second in Formula One?
I think if teams have the understanding that that is the case, then yes, definitely. I do think, however, I do think the penalty was 5 seconds. I do think that was okay enough, just from my opinion. And I think sometimes, like 5 seconds can change everything. Like it changed Maxwell's race. It's not as if it didn't affect them. And I think like a lot of people say like, oh, 5 seconds is nothing. And I'm like, but in terms of motorsport, 5 seconds is a hell of a lot of time. And I think sometimes people are like, oh, it's just short, like 10 seconds would have been better. But it did affect his race. He did lose the win. We can't say for definite that it was because of that, but he definitely lost an opportunity to go for that win because of that penalty. So I think they gave the right amount of punishment towards him in the sense that he didn't win the race. But also, I do, however, believe that the FIA need to be consistent in what they're given with penalty. It's the one thing that I think the FIA just annoys everyone at the fact that they're so inconsistent with everything. And it's not just penalties, but it's sort of like, if they want to they need to set up a system where they just tell us, basically, if you do this wrong, you're getting this amount of this number of seconds, and that's going to be the penalty. And they need to be then consistent with every incident that occurs. Look at the paper, look at the incident, and go, that's an incident that is this amount of time penalty, and then give it. I think they're like, oh, they'll look at every incident on an individual basis, and I get that, but there also has to be some level of consistency throughout the entire season, because that's where complaints start getting brought in. That's where people don't rely on the FIA. That's where fans get annoyed. And I don't see why they can't see that. So I do think something more should be brought in, that the teams and then essentially us will know that what was that and what penalty it would be, and they need to give them out consistently.
Yep. Yep, you're absolutely right. You're right. It's one that kind of rumbles on a lot and will continue to do so. As far as I'm concerned, that's going to continue as long as Mohammed Ben Sulayem is in charge of the FIA, to be honest, because he cares more about faking a swear from Max Verstappen than he does about how that bleeped out message from Max. He did not say the F word. He said bloody. That's bloody lovely, is what he said. Not that's effing lovely or whatever it was that they bleeped out. They're faking messages now, which is really pathetic. But let's not get into that because we have a few breaks of weeks coming up. Plenty of time for us to have full rants about the FIA. Let's move it on then very quickly to the McLarens. Just kind of moving on from Red Bull. Piastri obviously led from the front. He wasn't the quicker of the two McLarens all weekend. Lando very much put a marker down, and it wasn't just FP1. He was quickest in all sessions, and Q1 and Q2, and then just stuffed it in the wall at the start of Q3. And Piastri took over and led from the front. So, two-parted question, Coops. Piastri is now with the bookies the odds-on favourite, but I mean it's only 5 races in. That actually doesn't matter right now. But do you think this is his? Is he going to see it out now, or 10th to 4th? It's good recovery from Lando, all things considering. Wasn't perfect, but he has a 2 week break now, ending on a little bit more of a high than he possibly could have if he finished 10th. 2 week break to where he won his first race. Where do you see McLaren, and where do you see them coming after Saudi and into Miami?
I think they're still going to be at the front. I think Lando's going to be there or thereabouts, but Saudi Arabia starting is showing the issues that Lando had last season and the kind of thing that you hoped he'd got sorted. It's the wee minor things, but he's there, ready to take it. Like he could have last year, he could have really took the fight to Max in the second half of the season, but he made too many wee things. There was a stat, was it 5 or 6 times he got on pole and he never led the race by the end of the first lap for God knows how many races. I mean, the fact it becomes a stat means it's not just one or two. And then this year, the first flying lap, he's the one that was going to set the marker. He's the one that's going to put everybody at the wow, this is what we need to beat. And he couldn't make it around the lap. And we know he's got the talent. We know he's a good driver, but this is the issue we have. He kind of needs to be more Piastri, which is a weird thing to say because Oscar has the temperament, the speed, the talent. He has the aggression. He needs to have the aggression. But man, every time you speak to him or hear him talk, it just feels like he's going to Tesco for his weekly shop. He just needs to calm himself down a bit. He's got all the tools. It's a bit like what Leclerc did for quite a long time, where he just drove at the wrong side of the limits of the car. Ferrari had a great car and could have got pole, and he got pole several times. And I think what was it? I can't remember where it was. I think it was Miami, where he was blisteringly fast. Binned it. France a few years ago. Binned it. First place. He just pushed that wee bit further than he needed to go. And I mean, he might come out and be like, and he's even his post-race talk, he was like, they were saying about him, about McLaren have the fastest car, and he was like, no, we don't. People need to stop saying that. No, you do.
And Oscar immediately came back and said, don't know what you said that. We do have the fastest car.
Yeah. McLaren have said they've got the fastest car. Red Bull are saying they've got the fastest car. Everybody knows they've got the fastest car. Everything is lined up for them. Norris trying to deflect that is stupid. It's just it just makes him look a wee bit weaker than he really needs to look.
Yeah. No, you're right, and it is a shame. And of course, what that means is that crash just cost him dearly. He is now second in the championship. Oscar Piastri leads the championship. He's the first Australian to do it since Webber around this time of the year in 2010, which is a long time ago. Also shows that Webber was really outclassed by Vettel in the later years because he only ever led the championship in 2010. If he'd have done it in 11, 12, or 13, then this stat would be the first Australian driver to lead it since one of those years. Anyway, let's not dwell on Mark Webber. Oscar's doing pretty good for a number one driver, and he is now 10 points clear of Lando. So, Amy, we've seen Lando, I suppose, maybe struggle with the pressure of being the hunted, and now he's back to being the hunter. Who do you think's gonna kind of manage this better? Is Oscar gonna just, because he's a bit robotic, like not care that he's in the lead, and is this maybe going to just relax and calm Lando and take a little bit of the spotlight off Lando a little bit?
I've said from the very start that I think Oscar will win a World Drivers' Championship before Norris. And I still stand by that statement. Like, if it's wrong at the end of the year, it's wrong. Everyone has opinions. But I just think Norris has given so much time to McLaren, even when McLaren weren't performing. And there's a lot of pressure on him now. He's realised, oh my gosh, I've got this car. I can do it. And I do think the pressure has got to him.
Mm.
I think, whereas Oscar, not that he doesn't care, because I think he actually cares a lot, but he's so calm. And I think he knows that he's in the early doors of his career. So he can kind of
If he
chill
makes a
out.
mistake or loses it, he's only 3 years in. Lando's what,
Yeah.
7 at this point or something like that?
And that's another he's been in Formula One for 7 years. These mistakes can't necessarily happen anymore. Like, there's no excuse for them. And I do think the public have been a bit harsh on Lando. Like, there was one stat I saw on Instagram, the fact that they've got the same amount of wins, and obviously they've been racing for like this like a lot of different times in Formula One. But the issue is, like, at the time, Lando did not have a car that would win, so I don't think that was fair. And that stat doesn't correspond to the drivers themselves. But I do think I think especially with Oscar, like, he's an incredible driver, and I think he will he'll easily just float above everything, and I think that's what he will do. He's just not that bothered about everyone else on the grid. Whereas Lando seems to be really worried about everyone else all the time. And I don't see what it is. Like, one time it's him getting compared to Max and he gets stressed about that. But now it's his teammate and he's realized, oh my gosh, my teammate is now going ahead. And I love the fact that Mark Webber was so insistent that there will be no one or two drivers at McLaren, because I think that has really flipped the switch for everyone. And I actually think it's made for an exciting championship battle. And again, we are only 5 races in. Everything can change. Oscar might DNF the next race. Like, anything can happen. And I think people need to keep that in mind as well, because I think people are like, oh my gosh, he's leading the championship, he's going to win it. That's not how it works. Like, more likely than not, he's going to get overtaken.
100%. I think you're right. It is only 5 races in, and like nobody's even crossed 100 points yet. Oscar's on 99 points, so it's still very, very early doors. And we saw last year how late in a season, but then how quickly it can change. McLaren was only really around the summer break and after the summer break that they coughed past and ran away nearly with the championship, and then got caught again by Ferrari. So yeah, there's plenty of time to go yet. Was it 24? There's 19 races to go, if I've done my maths right there, which is a lot. And you're right, Miami, anything can happen in Miami. There's almost certainly going to be a safety car if it doesn't rain, even if it does rain. Imola, anything can happen in Imola. It might rain in Imola. Spain, could be a safety car in Spain. Monaco, there'll almost definitely be, like, we're into Europe now, and there's no the European season last year was incredible. We had so many different winners. The Mercedes came on, the Ferraris came on, the McLaren started winning. Like, the European season last year was absolutely incredible, and we've just started it. We haven't even started it yet. It's starting in 2 races. So you're right. It's a good start to the season. While we were all maybe a little bit nervous that some of the tracks coming up might not be exciting, I think the narrative behind, I think Netflix are going to make a good one out of this season. Just the human story and drama behind what's maybe a little bit dull on track. Let's move on then to Ferrari. Charles Leclerc got their first race podium of the season. Obviously, Lewis Hamilton won the sprint race in China, but this was their first, well, I'm not going to call it a feature race because it's not Formula 2. It's the first main race podium. And Lewis, unfortunately, by comparison, it continues to struggle. It was not a good weekend for him at all. And he's basically said this is just how life's going to be for the rest of the season, which just smacks of even worse when his teammates on the podium. So, Coops, what did you make of Ferrari this weekend in Saudi Arabia?
Oh, it was a very binary situation, to be honest. I mean, Lewis just doesn't look happy. He's not able to quite adjust to the car. It's 5 races in. You know, when you spend pretty much your whole life professionally driving a Mercedes power unit, and then you move to Ferrari. And I think a few people need to remember that. There was someone, I saw a comment on one of our socials saying that, Antonelli never driven before, never driven a Mercedes. doesn't need time. Carlos Sainz doesn't need time. I thought you're pushing the boat out there because he didn't exactly do very well, Carlos, in the first few races, and he's only just starting to kind of get there or thereabouts. Uh, so, and then what they're forgetting is Lewis Hamilton has had such a long career, never driven anything other than a Mercedes engine or power unit. That's a big thing. But maybe there is something about maybe he just doesn't quite have that wee bit there. It happens to everybody at some point. Maybe he's just lost a tenth or two. Maybe those instincts that got him through before just aren't quite there. Maybe Formula One is just moving away from what Lewis Hamilton can do anymore. There's
I
a lot
still
of
think
factors.
I still think there's an element of the ground effect. The cars are literally not as nimble as they used to be. They are laggy. They're slow on turn in. They're reliant so heavily on the center and back end of the car for their downforce and their grip. And Lewis Hamilton is used to being able to absolutely chuck a car around the place. We've seen him at his absolute best. He drives a Formula One car like a go kart. And you can't do that in these cars. And I've said it for a couple of years now. It's the ground of like moving to Ferrari is not going to remove his issues with ground effect cars. And so far that seems to be the case. Can he turn it around though? Is he being a bit harsh on himself after a bad weekend?
Well, I think he can. I mean, he's Lewis Hamilton. I think if you can find that setup window that's decent and more to his liking, I think he'll do well. But I mean, these guys are perfectionists by nature. That's why they are who they are. Uh, they're a different breed of animal. They hold themselves to an incredibly high standard. And, he probably is a bit harsh on himself, but going by what what he would want to achieve and how he wants to do it, yeah, there will be disappointment. He probably is always going to be that hard on himself, but I do think he'll get somewhere. I It will be interesting if he decides to stay on, if it becomes a really bad season for him points wise and he doesn't get anywhere near where he would like to be. Would he stay around for 2026? I don't know. I mean, the new rule sets coming next year, I mean, the scaremongering and the things that are coming out about them are pretty worrying. So I don't know how many drivers are really that excited about them anyway. But Lewis is in a bit of a low one just now, and I think he was expecting things to be a bit higher and a bit better. His body language is a bit off as well. I think he's kind of acting a bit like he did when Mercedes was ending, and I think he expected things to be just a wee bit happier, a bit more motivating, and they're just not.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. I mean, looking at his results, obviously 10th in Australia, disqualified from a good position in China, it wasn't his fault, and won the sprint race in China, 7th in Japan, 5th in Bahrain, 7th in Saudi. It's those lower downforce tracks that seem to suit him a little bit more. China and Bahrain spring immediately to mind. And again, it's because the car, what it has less downforce in, is probably a little bit more reactive, which you'd probably like. Unfortunately, like Miami is relatively low downforce as well, I would have thought. It's more mechanical grip around that fiddly section than just high speed, which the Ferrari should be okay at. Imola and Monaco are a different kettle of fish entirely, but like Canada and Austria, and I mean, I'd still stick a fiver on him to win in Silverstone just because he's Lewis Hamilton at Silverstone. Nobody expected him to win last year, and he was pretty good in Silverstone last year. So it'd be interesting. Moving on to his former team then, Mercedes, they had a pretty good weekend, if a little bit quiet in Saudi. We didn't really hear all that much about them. And George Russell, if he was sitting around waiting for the miracle to happen to bag his free podium again this week, it didn't happen. But 5th and 6th for the Mercedes, good result for Antonelli, and Russell remains the only driver to finish in the top 5 in every single competitive session, qualifying, sprint, and race of this season so far. And we mentioned him last week, Amy. He's my driver of the season so far. Russell for his consistency, and okay, he was a little bit further off, but he's still in there. And a good result for Kimi. Good weekend for Mercedes, all things considered.
I actually think George Russell is probably the one to watch. Like, he's under the radar so much, and I've not seen anyone online really be like anyone checking out George Russell, just because like I actually think if this consistency could work in his favor, if other teams are just not given the same, then this could bring. I think does he sit 3rd in the championship at the minute?
He is 4th. Piastri, Norris, Verstappen, Russell. So he's 4th at the moment, but all 3 drivers above him have won races.
So
he's less than a race win behind,
I do think he can sort of, with Russell, because I think he's comfortable now. He knows that he is the leader, I guess. I want to say, I don't like saying number one drivers and things because I think it's a bit, I don't think anyone have a number one driver, but I do, but he knows he's stepped into that position. I think he's taken it really well. I actually think he's taken it in his stride. And as much as I love Kimi and I think he's doing brilliant as well, I think Mercedes have a solid lineup. They just don't have the best car on the grid. And I actually think if Mercedes had a better car, then they would be massive threats to McLaren. And I do think they still somewhat are. And I do think they need to keep an eye out before, because I just got a feeling they're going to come in through the year, and I do think they will get better. I think Mercedes are one team that we just need to carry on watching, because Kimi right now, he's yes, he can make mistakes, and I'm going to put my hands up for that, but he can also, he knows he's so determined on that. You can see it in him that he wants it so badly. And with Russell, he's not going to give up. He's been waiting for the time to take over from Lewis Hamilton. He was basically trained for a year to do this while they knew Hamilton was going to Ferrari. So I think he stepped up to it, and I actually think they should be quite proud of what he's achieved. But even though they're being under the radar on most races, I think we need to bring them back on the radar, because I don't think it'll be long until George Russell will get quite close to challenging them.
Yep, I think you're dead right. And as you said, under the radar, I've just had a look at the constructor standings there. They're second. I didn't know that. Now they're miles behind. They're 77 points behind McLaren already, which, you know, McLaren have two number one drivers fighting for wins every weekend. It's a different kettle of fish, but Mercedes are proving over Ferrari and Red Bull of what the benefit of having two drivers in the mix does. Red Bull only have one, and Tsunoda's doing better until he hit Gasly. And Red Bull will score double points, you'd imagine, at most races this year now, but it won't be enough. A second and a ninth, or a third and a seventh, are not going to be enough to overturn McLaren or Mercedes at this rate. And Kimi Antonelli, 10,000 kilometers of preseason testing is really paying off for them. They're second, and the way they're going, they'll be a pretty comfortable second. And yeah, I think all it's going to take is one tweak to that car, one track that suits them a little bit better, and George Russell will be a shoe-in for a win. He's been very, very quick this year. As you said, he's gone so far under the radar, and I think he's just thriving on it. Like, the pressure of being up against Hamilton or being in the Williams for too long, and that first race deputizing for Mercedes, how it all went wrong, completely not his fault at all. People still complain, oh, he should have won that race. Of course, he should have won that race. He did win that race, but Mercedes, the only time they have one gaffe in them every 3 bloody years, and they decide that it's that year in Bahrain that they have their gaffe of the year. But yeah, it's very, very impressive how George and Kimi are getting on this year. I didn't have particularly high hopes for Kimi Antonelli, but I have been impressed with them. Another team who were impressive this weekend at last, after a couple of rough weekends, was Williams. And they solidified their fifth place. They've taken fifth place back off Haas. Double points finish for them in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Sainz eighth, his first points finish for Williams after he was, again, knocked out of it in Bahrain. He's been a bit unlucky, bit slow, then unlucky. Now he seems to be settling in, starting to understand the car. And Coops, to your point, in terms of like switching engines, he's gone the other way around. He's going from a Ferrari engine to a Mercedes engine. And it is a learning curve for sure that Albon is at the bed in for, that Sainz is having to learn, because he was never even in a Mercedes-powered McLaren. He left when they were still Renault, I think. So it's a learning curve there. 8th and 9th for Albon and Sainz, and good teamwork from them, Coops, to hold Hadjar off, who we'll give a special shout out to in a minute. But playing the DRS train, Sainz reliving his Singapore masterclass, and 8th and 9th is a good result.
Yeah, it was good for them. Finally, where they probably should be, round about that kind of 8th, 9th. On a good day, they could probably sneak up a couple more places. But, finally seeing both Williams doing exactly what they need to do, and having Carlos doing what he was hired to do, really. And it was they just quietly got on about their business, which is a nice. Sometimes you need those races where they're just quiet, no real dramas, did what they needed to do. You saw them on the TV feed every so often doing their thing. Yeah, it was pretty good. Yeah, couldn't really complain too much about it.
Yeah, it's their best start to a season since 2016, Amy. At 2016, they started with like 65 points after 5 races or something like that. Different era, still very much an engine sport at the time. But this seems more impressive. The car seems to work. It's not just a rocket ship in a straight line like the Williams has just been for the last 10 years. And yeah, Sainz seems to be a little bit happier now. He was like right on the gearbox of the man who nicked his seat.
I think I think he's actually content with where he's at, and don't get me wrong, I think he should be in a team that's arguably going for championships. I think he should be up there, but what he can provide for Williams, it's going to be interesting to see the growth over the next couple of years, especially when the new regs come in. I'm just really excited to see how they will develop as a team because I think Carlos Sainz is probably he provides a lot. James Vowles have said that have come out and said that Carlos Sainz is so they need him in that garage even if he's not driving. And I think that just proves how good of a driver he is, that even when he's not on track, he's useful to the team. And it's going to be a big change for him. And he's probably struggling with the fact that he's adjusting to a different car. He's adjusting to not being in the top three or getting podiums. He's adjusting to that, I think. And I do think the way they've developed, it's about time. Like it's about time. And I feel happy for Williams. And I'm not a Williams fan. Never really have been, but I feel like it's one of those things where people say everyone's a Ferrari fan. Right now, I think everyone's a Williams fan because I think everyone just wants to see them do well after so long of hardship. But I think Carlos is quite comfortable where he is, and I am interested to see what he can do over the next few races. And he hasn't had a fantastic start, but it's that struggle, I think, getting used to a different car. But he's also not doing awful, and I think there's a lot of things online about he shouldn't have been dropped from Ferrari. I think that conversation needs to move away now. And although we would all prefer him probably to be in a higher team, I think he's at Williams. He's doing well at Williams, and I think Williams are very grateful to have him there.
I think so too. And like you said, James Vowles, he's run that team very, very well. They finished ninth last year, which means while yes, they would have got a lot of development time to work at the 26 car, which might work out for them in the right way. This year, if they can cling on to fifth, that will bring a decent amount of wind tunnel time and an absolutely enormous injection of money, which will pay for Carlos Sainz, basically. So it was a gamble by Williams to even be able to bring him. The Atlassian deal definitely helped. But it's already starting to pay off, and I think as he gets more comfortable now, that car is a top 10 finisher. They should be fighting at least for double points every weekend, I think, and that should be their target for this year. And I think if they do, they should comfortable. They're going to be where Aston Martin were last year, like in no man's land in fifth, miles away from Formula One, but well ahead of Formula 1.5. The Formula 1.25 on their own in the middle. Speaking of Aston, Coops, he was 8 seconds off a point was Fernando Alonso. He remains pointless for this season so far. I think it's possibly his worst or second worst start to a season ever in terms of points scored. And he's come out and said they might just have to get used to having no points this year. He is very clearly just biding time until, as we heard this weekend, Adrian Newey's full time is being devoted to next year's car. Fernando must just be counting his dollars and counting down the seconds at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to be his worst season. And I mean, there's no redeeming qualities of that car, is it really?
It's not even that pretty anymore.
And yeah, it doesn't look that pretty. It's if Fernando Alonso's struggling to get points in it, it must be closer to a tractor than a Formula One car, in all honesty. And you've got Lance Stroll, who get no basis for this, but it just looks like he's phoning it in, even more so than normal. What else can you say? Like, yeah, there's a bit of light. It's a Adrian Newey shaped light at the end of the tunnel, and we will see if he figures something out for the new lot of regulations. And all is good in the world in Aston Martin, but it's going to be painful if you're an Aston Martin fan for the rest of this year.
That's probably why I managed to get an Aston Martin coloured hat for so cheap from the raceworks.com the other day. Because nobody else wants them, even though it's the lovely lime green one that Fernando was wearing in Saudi. It's lovely. The raceworks.com code EF1 to check out for 10% off site wide. get the plug in as well. Thank you to them as always. That will pretty much do it in terms of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix review. It was an all right race. It showed that one-stop races can be interesting enough. I think the safety car helped it a little bit, as it usually does, but it was quite early on, so it didn't make too much difference to the end of the race. And that kind of does it for the first triple header of the year. Now there's another one coming up very soon, but we have a 2-week break now to Miami. So any other final business? Amy, I believe you heard a bit of a rumor today, and we'll caveat this with this is a rumor and completely unverified, but this is an interesting one.
Yeah, apparently, on a totally unverified source, I can't lie, probably that George Russell might be going to Red Bull Racing, which there's been talks of the fact that maybe Helmut Marko had a conversation with George Russell in the paddock, which I don't know how true it is, but if that did happen, I don't think I would be mad, but it would have to, I could only see George Russell at Red Bull if Max wasn't there.
Yeah.
That is the only time I could see him there. And I could see him in a Red Bull, just not with Max. And I don't think, imagine them as a driving duo. I think they would be a death in Formula One. It's literally like, it would be horrific to have them two work together. But I do think George can offer a lot to Red Bull. And I think when Max does decide to move on, if he decides to move on, but I do have a strong feeling that I don't know what it is, but I don't think he'll be at Red Bull for as long as everyone thinks he will be. Because either I just don't think he's into racing that much anyway, to the point where he may retire early, or that he might seek avenues elsewhere with maybe Adrian Newey. So there's those two options, and I just don't see him sticking with Red Bull all the time. But I do think if George did end up going to Red Bull, that would be interesting. And I think I think he has the style of racing that would fit a Red Bull car.
It's an interesting one, and I wouldn't be surprised if this maybe comes hot on the heels of Jos Verstappen reefing into Helmut Marko a couple of weeks ago. That maybe Helmut is just going and talking to everybody and making sure he gets caught on camera talking to everybody. Maybe he's certainly sly enough to do that, but at the same time, Max is out of contract this year. Everybody seems to think, and Jack Villeneuve said it a couple of weeks ago, that Aston Martin will throw literally a boatload of money at him, a factory in Silverstone sized wad of cash at him, and say, come here, come to Adrian Newey, come back to Honda, let's go win a championship with the Aston Martin. And I'd be putting my money on that happening. And if he does leave, Red Bull are very limited in options on who their first driver is, because I mean, who would their top four choices? Charles Leclerc will never leave Ferrari. Just like if Lewis Hamilton coming doesn't kick Charles Leclerc out, and he's comfortably beating Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc's not leaving Ferrari until he is kicked out himself, and that's not going to happen next year. Lewis Hamilton's not going to go to Red Bull, and he's not performing well enough to say, "Oh yeah, I could do it in Red Bull." And the McLaren boys, maybe one of them, maybe Lando, if Piastri beats Lando, maybe Lando might want out, maybe, but it's Lando or George Russell, who also is out of contract at the end of this year. Now, he has a very close relationship with Toto. I think Toto Wolff is his manager, but if he's out of contract, wild speculation, totally unverified rumors.
If it was Lando, though, I think Christian Horner would have to go back on his words that if he could pick any McLaren driver, he'd pick Oscar.
Yeah, well, that's true. I don't think Lando would want to go to Red Bull. I just think he might eventually want out of McLaren because he's been there for so long. As you said, he's their star boy. But Piastri's come in a little bit like a last Aussie to do it. When Danny Ricciardo came into Red Bull was the to Vettel was the golden boy in Red Bull, and the young Aussie came in and usurped him, and Vettel left the team. So, I think anything could happen. I think silly season this year, obviously, it's not going to be as mad as last year with the news of Lewis going to Ferrari. I don't think anything's going to top that for some time. But Max to Aston could be up there. Coops, any final bits or any final drivers you want to shout out before we finish up?
Just touching on the first corner incident between Gasly and Tsunoda.
Yes.
It wasn't really Andy's fault. It's one of those racing incidents. It was a shame because Tsunoda looked like he got himself back going, but there must have been some damage to that rear wing or something. It would have been nice to see what Gasly and Tsunoda could have done because it looked like they had a bit of decent pace. I haven't seen anything online to say it was MD's fault, really, but it just thought it was worth touching on.
Yeah, they did investigate it during the race, and it was chalked off as an actual racing incident. I think they got the call right on that. Gasly was a little bit opportunistic, but he was ahead of the corner. But if you look at both onboards, neither of them slid, neither of them oversteered, neither of them understeered. Yuki turned the corner and his wheel stayed bang on. He didn't try and close him off. He didn't force him off the track or anything. He did nothing right. I don't think he even saw him coming until he was passed. Could Pierre have bailed out of it? Yes, I think he could have. I think he could have bailed out a second earlier, but again, the angle that he was at, I don't think he saw 100% where Yuki's car was. And again, he wasn't turning dramatically into Yuki. Total racing incident, and everyone's saying, "Oh, how come Max got penalized and stuff like that?" It's different. It just is different. They looked at all the onboards. It was a really unfortunate racing incident. I think you're right. I think both of them could have scored really, really good points. Gasly looked quick this weekend, and to be fair, so did Yuki. He was up. He was up in the top echelons in practice. He looked a bit more comfortable. He was on for points. I think that's a big shout. I think we were robbed of a really, really interesting fight between the two of them. And Lando Norris would have had to pass them on merit, not just on safety car. So
Yeah.
yeah, a bit of a shame on that one. Hopefully both of them can bounce back. They both seemed all right. They both seemed to accept that it was a racing incident. I hope they both bounce back. And you're right. Shout out to Gasly. He has been phenomenal this season so far. That car actually isn't as bad as their points scored so far would suggest. It did look good in testing. It does look good in Gasly's hands. We won't mention doing because we might not have to for much longer.
Mhm.
That will do it for our review of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. As I said, we have a 2 week break now before we get to Miami. So let me just give you the details for Miami. It's another sprint weekend. So we're looking at the weekend of the 2nd to the 4th of May. F1 will be on Friday the 2nd at 5:30 p.m. UK Ireland time. Sprint qualifying will be that Friday night at 9:30 p.m. The sprint itself will be on Saturday the 3rd of May at 5 p.m. and qualifying after that at 9 p.m. And then the main race will be on Sunday the 4th of May at 9 p.m. So get your Star Wars hats out and watch the Miami Grand Prix. That's how that works. We will be back for our preview of the Miami Grand Prix next week. And in between now and then, head over to our YouTube channel and hit subscribe. Enter the competition to win a Lego set. We are going to be sharing one of our old episodes, an interview we did with Mark Gallagher, who at the time was Eddie Jordan's right hand man. He's a journalist and a Formula One expert. He's been around the paddock for absolutely ages. I think, Coop's probably the best interview we've ever done in terms of the anecdotes we got. We were talking to him for about 3 hours that night. Some of the
Oh,
stories he
it
tells are
was,
amazing.
yeah, it was very good, and it was nice when we were sharing the video and relived a couple of the snippets. Yeah,
Yeah.
looking forward to watching it again. Before we go, a couple of things to talk about. We did our own predictions for this race, remember?
Oh, yes, we did. Are you going to call
Uh,
us all out right
and
now?
yes. So I actually finally remembered to write them down. I have them in front of us. So it was pole position and the top three.
Yes.
So both of us went with Lando for pole.
Which we'd have
Uh,
got if he hadn't clipped that curb.
hmm
I'm
uh,
grasping at straws already.
yeah. Both of us went with the Lando Norris win.
Okay.
Yeah, I went with Piastri second and Hamilton third. This is where it goes really badly because Sean went Norris, Russell, Leclerc.
Clerk. Uh, I got the clerk
Yeah,
right.
well, yeah. I mean, I got Piastri in the top three, not in the right place. You got Leclerc in the right place, and nobody else. Uh, so yeah, not good.
There is a version of the multiverse where we were both right.
Well, yeah. I mean, even Doctor Strange is going to have to go through a lot of different billions of combinations to try and find that.
Lot of portals for that one, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a good one. So we will do that, of course, again. Final thing, just before we go, a couple of comments on our YouTube channel. Thank you very, very much to everybody who commented. Oscar will win the championship before Lando, so that's from Frankie. Agrees with you, Amy. Um, hate Miami, but excited for F1 to be back after 2 weeks. Charles was decent. The strategy was very, very good. Yep, that's a really, really good point. Shout out to Charles Leclerc again, proving that he's very good on his tires. He ran those mediums much longer than he should have. That's what put him in contention for that podium. So fair play to him. So yes, thank you very, very much for your comments on that. Thank you all very much for listening. That'll do it, like I said, for our Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. We'll be back next week, and do head over to our YouTube channel. Hit subscribe. You'll enter the competition automatically to win a Lego F1 Speed Champion set of your choice when we hit 500 subscribers. We'll be uploading our classic interview with Mark Gallagher this weekend, so do give that one a listen. It's really great. He talks about Michael Schumacher's debut and his first test with Formula One. Talks a lot about Eddie Jordan, which is lovely given that he passed away a little while ago. So some really, really great anecdotes about Eddie Jordan, and an absolutely hilarious story about Bernie Ecclestone scaring the crap out of a bunch of senior Formula One journalists. So head over to YouTube, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and you'll get notified as soon as that episode drops. Thank you as always for listening. We have been Everything F1. Check us out on all socials. Check out the everythingf1.com website for daily news and articles. And as always, check out our sponsors, theraceworks.com, for all of your F1 and motorsport merch. And use code EF1 at checkout for 10% off site-wide. Thank you very much to Coops for joining me.
Thank you.
And thank you very much to Amy for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I have been Sean. We'll be back next week. Thank you very much and good night.
Bye-bye.